So yeah, I'm like real excited because we now get to go into our bonus game.
Yes, we have one bonus game, which I won't spend too long on. But what I will do is just give a shout out to the other games that could have made it this year, because we've had a huge year, massive year.
Yeah.
Some of the games that didn't quite make the cut. Normally I reserve the bonus game for a different game in a different year. So a game that didn't come out this year, but I happened to play this year.
Yeah.
Now this bonus game this year just happens to be very close to 24, but it was released last year.
November to November. It's fine.
Yeah, it's perfect. But some of the other games from this year that didn't make the cut, Animal Well. Yeah, that's a magnificent game. Great solo Metroidvania style exploration. Really good game. Deserves a lot more shout out than it did. Maybe a little too short. But still magnificent. Excellent atmosphere.
Yeah.
The soundtrack, the different movement and pixels, again like Balatro, like little flourishes just help bring it alive. It's a lovely game. There's no combat whatsoever. It's all exploration and puzzle solving. That deserves a shout out. Another game, Songs of Conquest, which very nearly made it into number 3. Very nearly. The only thing that held that game back was there's just a few AI issues. The AIs would kind of act a bit weird, and then it would like soft lock between goes if you're against the AI.
Yeah.
So they didn't really have it in a great spot. You could make custom maps, and the AI would soft lock on it, and then you'd have to just, after 4 hours, you'd have to just stop because the AI broke itself and you'd have to just stop, which is disappointing. But it basically plays like a Heroes of Might and Magic from the 90s, except it's like a spiritual successor to that. Really, really good. Probably could do with more factions. I think they released a new faction this week, but Songs of Conquest, it's kind of a nice kind of like you're building up your camp, getting some money, upgrading your units, and then sending your units out to battle against others, and then take control of their towns, look for resources, capture objectives.
Yeah.
We're in a game. That was that close.
So close.
That close to making it to number 3. It was just the AI locking and glitching and bugs that just kept it out.
Yeah.
There's no bugs that I've ever found in Against the Storm, and that's why it's innovation and something that's so fresh and an original idea made into number 3 compared to like Songs of Conquest.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Huge love for that. Love that game.
Yeah.
And then another game, which was my Future Frother from last year, if people can remember that, was Helldivers. Again, a game that kept itself off because it just so many own goals, kept on scoring against itself. It can't have a run of amazing things without having a run of terrible things. It's one to the other. Ultimate high, ultimate low. Kept going. You'd bring in a brilliant update that fixed itself. Then you'd need required login from PSN. Then it would bring in vehicles and all this thing. Then it would do a partnership with Killzone, and the skins were like 20 quid each.
So bad.
It's like, no, stop scoring own goals. They bring out an amazing update with new content, but the content's bugged and broken, and the servers are busted, and you can't play on it. It can't go on a run. It just can't.
Helldivers is a great game, and we still play it because they've just
Super
gotten
game.
a new
I'm still
update.
playing it.
But
We're still playing it now.
There's always something. Like it's like handing like a piece of cake to you and then smacking it out of your hand, because you'd be like, oh my god, like they do, like as you said, they do an update, but it would bug something else. So it's just like that ridiculous stuff. It was like, well, it's like this is just unplayable, like in a sense, because it's just like, what's the point if it's just going to be like too difficult? And then like I think like with the recent update, like they did do very well with the new update, because they like even had patch notes like within 48 hours of it. Like we noticed within like the 24 hours, I think actually we played it, that there were differences. But then of course they ruined the joy of that with the whole Killzone like skins, where it's like instead of doing just here's like a special like war bond where you like work your way through like earning points into each, they were like, no, you gotta pay 20 quid for one skin of just like an outfit. And I'm like, why? Like, why would you do this? This is stupid.
And even before that, there was times it released in February, and I think they had like summer updates that completely broke it. And they had other things, like they would do a massive, they would release a war bond, which is kind of like a paid kind of patch or paid kind of content update, which would release different types of weapons, but they're all themed off something. But what they would do is they would release a fire war bond, and you'd buy your fire war bond and be very excited about using a fire, and then they'd nerf the fire the day after,
which was stupid.
It's like they can't. That's literally the day after. They cannot go on a run. It's one good thing followed by one bad thing, and there's a huge uproar, and then there's an outcry about it. Which, well, that's a different story. But sometimes, and I feel like Arrowhead, the studio, I feel like not all of this is their fault. I actually think like it's a lot of, like everything in life, a lot of corporate overreach. I think a lot of it is Sony's direction. They're getting that in their ear. You have to do this. Has to be a certain price. Has to be out now. Regardless, everything's rushed.
It does feel that way.
Because I feel like if Arrowhead, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. If Arrowhead were left to their own devices, and if they were a true indie studio, we wouldn't be getting as much content as quick as it is. But we'd be getting top quality, polished content, probably a quarter realistically, because they don't have Sony money. But it's that trade-off. Do you want well polished content maybe once every 6 months, or do you want half-hearted losses, half wins,
content for the sake of content
once a month,
rather than quality content that the gamers want?
Mwah. If you can't hear the kissing sounds, she summarized it perfectly. And that's why I love Helldivers, but it's because I couldn't... It's just not... It's not original enough either. It's just a third-person shooter. And it's terrible to play alone. It's solely a multiplayer game, and you have to play with your friends. Otherwise, there's no crack. The best crack is when you're role-playing in there, and you go in, and you're taking the piss, and you're messing. Load of messing. That's when the game is at its best. Not when you're fighting by yourself on level 10 million, and I'm a big fucking man. Who cares about that? When you're playing with your friends at level buddy 2, and you're role-playing in there, and you're like giving squad call-outs and trying to play a role almost. That and taking the piss. That is when the game is at its best.
500 kg bomb on you and you die, and you're like,
you drop the 500 kgs on your friends. Amazing. Amazing game. 10 out of 10. But 6 out of 10.
It's worth an honorable mention, but not a top 3, unfortunately, because of just the little things going on.
Yeah, if it can go on a run and get a load of things right, which it has done at the time of recording this. They've just released the Illuminate. They just released their first vehicle, which is so exciting. Which is what we were calling out for months, and we stopped playing it for about 2 or 3 months.
To give it a break.
Just give it a break, and now it feels like it's back. And when they brought it back, then they also had this the day after a controversy about skin prices.
At least
and racing prices.
That was an external factor versus they didn't bug the game, thankfully, like their last one.
That's true.
But,
that's true.
You know, we get there.
It's worth a shout out. But we are still playing it, and it is an excellent game, and I do recommend it if you have friends to play with.
Yeah. Is that your last honourable mention?
That's the last honourable mention. Yeah. So we got Animal Well, then we had the Songs of Conquest, and we have Helldivers. Yeah.
My honourable mention was Fabled, and I mentioned it previously, like during one of your examples of like from your top 3, and it was so lovely to the point that like it gave me such settler vibes, but like more cozy, less combat, but a fairy tales, got a beanstalk, got a giant, you know, let's see where we go with it. Like, I absolutely love it. It's such a cozy game for like anyone who just wants a city builder.
Love it.
It's such a satisfying city builder. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
But that's my honorable mentions just straight out. But it brings us into our
bonus game, and I won't spend too long on this because it's already been said many times before, but it's deserving.
It is. Our bonus game is
Baldur's Gate 3. Just superb.
Oh my
Superlative.
God.
Wonderful. Magnificent. All the adjectives.
Just every word under it. I think I'd probably say I played less games this year because we spent so much time playing Baldur's Gate.
Actually, yeah. Yeah. I think we were playing this straight for half a year, every Wednesday night for a solid 6 months.
I think we're like 80 hours, is it?
Yeah, we have Yeah, 90 nearly.
90, yeah.
We're just coming into the Baldur's Gate.
We're starting the third act. And we are in the third and going into it, and we are going to hopefully finish it over Christmas hopefully not into January, but maybe this side of Christmas, like the side of the new year, we'll finish it.
We should try and finish it.
But I love this as our like GOTY Wednesday couples game.
Incredible game. I mean, how do you perfect perfection? It's just so. To give a brief overview, if you've never heard of this bloody game, somehow it's probably the best game ever made. Just hands down. It's incredible. So for me though, it's special because it so accurately replicates like a tabletop role-playing experience like Dungeons & Dragons.
Yes.
But it does it so well in like video game format. It's just tremendous. It is Dungeons & Dragons, the video game. Really, in all but name. It's made by Larian and Wizards of the Coast, who obviously own Dungeons & Dragons. But the two standout features of the game that make it for me are, well, outside of the exploration and story, which is tremendous, but the combat is so satisfying. The tactical play, the spells, everything about the combat is so tactile. And the feedback is wonderful. Just like the screen shakes and shatters when you're doing like spells and when you're like making sword hits and hammer blows and all this. Like here, falling off the roof, like little screen shakes and sound effects. Just the presentation of the combat and the sound effects, like it sounds so visceral, like blades slashing, and everything is just so thick and crunchy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
When I say that, it's hard to explain, but the combat is so beefy.
Audio is so important in this game, and it deserved winning like the awards for it as it did, not just for the voice acting but also for the audio that happens in it and everything. I'm genuinely looking at this clip going like, where the hell was I during this fight? Probably one of those times where I was off to the side going like, do I need to step into this fight or are we good? Like, do I need to enter combat or do you want me to stay outside of it? But like, we've spent so many hours playing this game from a story point of view that when we do get into combat, like it makes like it's so interesting to get in there and see, because like depending on how you interact with characters also depends on how you do the combat. I mean the story is as interesting a story as it was for me back in one of my other favorite games, Disco Elysium, which the story in that was incredible. Maybe because the voice acting and the general acting, or if they do mocap or whatever it is just so detailed, so finely acted. It just helps sell the whole idea. And that's actually where I was going to come from. I can see you laughing over here about someone falling in the grease. In the grease. I was like, oh my god.
There goes me.
But this it's just sorry on a side point of like all those different sound effects is like putting in this like mechanic where it does impact you of what you've done is like I think is the biggest thing, because normally like when you play a roll top game like in D&D, if you're playing it like in person, like you can just, you know, you don't necessarily take into account everything that happens, but I think this is also a great way of not just with the story but also learning how to do like a D&D, like how to actually play a D&D game. Like if you don't know certain mechanics and how they normally affect people, like slipping in grease, like how fall damage works, like those sort of things, it actually is so well companion that it does give you that opportunity to like learn all these little bits. And I also think I just realized where I was during all this. I was fighting on this side in a different battle, killing them off, and you're like, what's happening here? And I'm like, right. What are you happening? You're in a fight, I'm in a fight, we're all in a fight, what's happening?
We were in two different fights, I think, at the same time. But that's an excellent point that you said there, and I had that before when I played Divinity Original Sin 2, which is the precursor to this game. It almost kind of helps you understand or visualize how a role-playing game or like tabletop game like Dungeons & Dragons can work. It helps teach you about fall damage and like jump distances and conditions and concentration spells, which I didn't even know how that really worked in the tabletop in Dungeons & Dragons. But this game kind of helps teach you, and it gives you a good focal point to sort of see how the rules around those games play, and that you can adapt those in. It's like, oh, I didn't realize how this worked. That's how it should work in our tabletop
Honestly,
game.
yeah. It also, like, obviously with the voice acting and all that, also showing how your interactions with people affect things, because like very much when like when we started D&D, it was very much a combat focus, but we've developed on from just singularly combat into being story prompting, more communication, more use of our skills and everything, rather than just going in and like stabbing someone or like blasting someone with a spell. Like, we're giving ourselves that opportunity to go ahead and do our little bits here.
Absolutely. And like how immersive Baldur's Gate is, that's what we've kind of adapted into our own personal D&D sessions with our friends, because we kind of understand that just all fighting all the time isn't really that fun. It's the messing you have outside of that, and the rolling for the different types of conversations you can have, and the messing you can have. And that really is like encapsulates how fun D&D is when you're role playing, like conversations, not just fighting all the time. I don't understand some people like conversations, but or combat, I mean, but other people like conversations and like the role playing aspect to it, and trying to like talk to somebody and rolling dice to try and beat that. And
the story.
To kind of formulate a story as well as the combat. So it comes in kind of twofold, you know, and we've embraced that really well, and Baldur's Gate does that excellently as well.
It is very much, especially when, like, as a little loop goblin myself, I love that I can do that in Baldur's Gate. I have so many things to the point that sometimes you, like, you're like, where did you get this? And I'm like, I actually can't remember. It's somewhere in some chest in some thing that I found it, like, 2 arcs ago. I don't know.
You are a little loop goblin.
I'm a loop goblin. Because you never know when it's going to come into handy. And actually, in fairness, a lot of the things we found have come in handy, which I think is a great story prompt of how diverse this game is, because we played once with a friend and they hadn't even seen half the things that we were seeing, because I love looking into every nook and cranny of a game to find what have you built in this world, because it is very much open world sandbox style. Like, you're able to find and play the way that you want, and that would be my most positive thing, like, that I love about this game, is you can go ahead and do so many different things and play in so many different ways. And I think it's so important, like, of like how much diversity is in this game, and you can play it as narrow as you want or as broad as you want. And as a loot goblin, I absolutely love it. But I guess, like, it's a great question for you then, is what did you love about this game, like your number one feature for it?
Well, outside of what I was talking about, the combat, I'd say my number one feature for this game, which is strange because I really like the sort of tactics and combat in most games I play, but for me this was the cast, the main cast, your main ensemble that travels with you. They're just incredible. Like, it's just wonderfully acted, wonderfully voiced. The main cohort, Asterion, Karlach, Shadowheart, Lizelle, all the gang, they're just amazing. Like, it's just, they're so personable. Their personalities have been so well written and so well developed. It just feels like actual people are traveling along with you, not just ones and zeros. They react to different things you do. They say things that against like decisions you've made, and they challenge you, and things happen, like encounters can happen out of the blue, and they'll give you their opinion on it, or they'll approve or disapprove, and there'll be cutscenes with them, and they're just so personable that you feel like they're like your friends, or like they're like a traveling kind of party with you, and they make or break the game for me. Well, outside of everything else, the game is just magnificently made. It's just superb, just magnificently made game. A triumph of video games, but the main cast, they do it for me. They're just amazing to travel with. So well written, so expressive, really diverse set of characters, and they're not afraid to. The writing in it isn't afraid to talk about difficult topics. There's kind of race wars. They talk about different hatreds between races, and there's just loads of different kind of political talking points that they talk about that are normally difficult, like Yeah, I can't really think of one off the top of my head, but I remember at the time when we were playing it, there were so many different difficult talking points.
It is though.
Jumping off
It
points.
is very much depending on obviously like how you build your characters and how you build your people, because like everyone's at a bit of a controversy at the start of it because of how the game opens, and you're all kind of interacting, and depending on how you go on the path and what options you choose in your dialogues depends on how you play the game. And I think that's where like the diverseness and the detail they've put into the voice acting really shows true with like how you're interacting, because like how you interact with Lizelle is different to how you're gonna interact with Shadowheart, and how Shadowheart like interacts versus Karlach is all different. Like Asterion and like Hansen, like they're all different characters like that you can interact with and build a relationship with or ruin a relationship with, because they have their own autonomy where they might also leave if they don't like you, and they're not in your party anymore, or like you might gather more party. Like it is so important, that voice acting, and I think like it really is so important when it comes to the points of like story prompts, where it comes from, that because it does cover very difficult conversations. It does cover religion, it does cover race, it does cover minorities. Like it does cover a lot of those things that you wouldn't think gets covered in a like an RPG, like a game, but it does actually cover those things off, and not in an in-your-face way of like here's like our stance on things. It gives you the freedom of how do you want to explore those things, and versus like how would you interact. Like are you going to side with like how one person says something, or are you going to go and side with like how someone else says something? Like it gives you that freedom to choose where you stand. It doesn't snowball you into a specific peg.
Yeah, and it doesn't shoehorn in those topics as well just for the sake of having them in. They're done really subtly but very well, and I think that's why the characters are so interesting, just because they have like they have their own little quirks. Like you said, you can like kind of make them mad and they leave, and they have like their own kind of like humor. Even the sense of humor in the game is like so funny, because there's so many different ways to interact with different characters, and they each have different ways they like to be talked to or spoken to, and they have their own like motivations and their reasons for being and their own goals, and it's just amazing how vividly they're brought to life. I don't know, it's just
it's so much dimension. It's not just like you interact one or two lines and leave. Like you know where they stand on their beliefs, you know what they'd be happy and sad with. Like you get to know what their favorite things are versus their dislikes. There's so much dimension to each character. It's not just a one line and go. Even the side characters, you get to learn so much about them, and then you're just like, oh my god, like I did not expect this much depth. Like they could easily have skimped and done shallow work on a lot of it, but they made sure to do the depth of character building that you would want in a game this enjoyable.
Absolutely, and it's for that reason it's so incredibly immersive. It's impossible not to get attached to the characters you're traveling with and your side characters in your camp, because they're so well realized, well written, and phenomenally performed by the actors. It's just, that's what really sells this game. It makes it easier. 100-hour journey with the characters is so much easier digestible, because these characters are so interesting. They're so lifelike. And outside of that, there's like a fully realized story with like in a beautiful fantasy setting with tons of armor, spells, weapons, swords, quests, side quests, monsters, battles, everything. It has everything. It's like a full fantasy opera. Beautiful. It's beautiful. But not only that, is that it's a wonder to play in multiplayer. It's a brilliant co-op experience. It's seamless. It's so easy, and the character creator is amazing. I think you spend like 2 hours in the character creator. We
definitely spend 2 hours like creating our characters.
It's brilliant.
Every time we level up, we're like there debating of like, well, how are we going to play our character? Like, does this make sense to get a character? Certainly for me, I do. I like genuinely do, and that's, I think the great thing is that you can put in as much effort or as little effort as you want, but still have a very immersive story. And I think like that's where like it becomes like a recommendation for like a lot of people. But even with all those positives, I wonder like, is there any feedback we would give?
So it's just a real shame. There's a lot of feedback actually. With a typical Larian game, there's a lot of feedback just because it's a Larian Studios game. It's so big. It's going to have minor issues. A lot of minor issues, but like it's going to have a couple of big issues. So this isn't part of my negative points, but one of the qualms I have about it is that your main character, your custom character who you play as, is not voiced at all. And I understand the decision if they wanted to go with this is you putting yourself into this world. Yeah. This is how you would react. But it would be cool if they voiced that. I would like, even if there was a switch to switch on, to be like, I want to hear what my character says when I click. No, you can't do that. I want to hear that as a voice. That helps me be more immersed. But I understand the silent protagonist. If they want to do that, I get that too. But for me, I would like if you could hear your character voice when you click on whatever action it is. That would be cool. A couple of other things. There's just so much jank with games like this. It's the same as Divinity. The same as Divinity 1. Or Divinity 2 and Divinity 1, I mean. It's just there's so much like kind of janky bugs and glitches.
You click something that you did not mean to click, and yet you're kind of like, how did that manage to happen?
Yeah, just like bugs and glitches. They don't break the experience, but they just kind of like irk a little bit. Like things like when you get into a forbidden area and you pass a 22 check, and then even though you're not supposed to be there, but you somehow passed it, and then for some reason that has bugged or glitched, and then the person asks you the same question again, and then you fail it, and then you're locked out of that area, and it jeopardizes an entire area, like mission critical area, and you can't go there again, or it turns all the guards against you, and you have to reload it back. Like, that's kind of crap. Like, why does that happen? I passed it the first time. Why are you asking me like straight away again? There's a couple others as well. Mainly, I don't think the names of the characters and the lore and the story characters that they're talking about have been well defined enough, because there's so many, especially with the Gith, like with Lae'zel, there's so many of those obtuse, randomly named, jargon, shite names that I can't understand who you're talking about from one interaction reference. Yeah,
trying to remember who they are talking about, and you're like, was that the one that we met here, annoying. Or was that the one that we met there?
Yeah, like with the Kethik, Vlatik, Voss, fucking piss off. Like, I don't understand. Shouldn't have to read a wiki before we're playing the game to remember who we're talking about. Like, they just sound so similar, and when you meet them, they look the same as each other. And it's like, what part of the story is this guy? Is this the king of the thing that you've been talking about, or were you talking about this little lowly farm peasant here? Like who are you talking about?
I think that was like definitely like for that whole Lae'zel like kind of arc, that was extremely difficult track.
They're just junk names like Vlaka blah blah blah.
They were too generic.
I don't know who that is.
They were too generic to like kind of differentiate them out in order to actually go in and be like, okay, to remember who's this, who's that, because it is actually a bit like, that is important. Like, it is important to remember who are we looking for and who we're trying to reference.
Yeah, you need audibly distinct names, and you need visually distinct characters, and the game didn't have either of those for, well, they did obviously because they're different races, but the Gith, that race, it's so hard to differentiate between the names and the characters because they dressed them all the same, and they kind of didn't look visually distinctive as characters, and I didn't like that because they had all these made up jargon names, and I couldn't remember what part of the story, who was like the main villain and who was like the side villain and who was like the helper and who was like the savior, and it's like,
who were good, who were bad, because it is like it is very important, because depending on how you do that interaction depends then how do you actually do like your follow through, if you will, on that storyline, because that is like a detailed storyline, but it starts before you even get to that entry point, and then when you leave it there's still references to them, and I'm sitting here going like, who are you?
Well, that's probably why I'm so mad, because the stories are so good in the game that you want to know what's going on. You're not just breezing through it to get to the next combat because combat is fun and crunchy and satisfying. You actually want to know what's going on in the world because you're so invested in the characters. And when you can't differentiate one character reference to the next when they're talking about certain characters, it means nothing.
That happened in Deathly 2, and I would agree with you. This is like a big thing, is like having that character differentiation, but also because it's like that's 80 hours ago that I would have had this reference. Like I can't remember.
Exactly.
I need some sort of like a rememoral. But like it happened in Shadow Heart's Arc. You ended up having like a bunch of just names said at you, and you're like, I actually don't remember who this is. Now we end up obviously relearning it, but like at first I had to be like, is this character? And you're like, no, that's that character. We ended up running back into, as I said, like you do the Githyanki, like you come across them 3 times, and the third time we were kind of sitting here going like, who are all you guys? Oh, this is that stupid one who had this like stupid thing happen to us, and we had to like fight our way through it. Like we had to try and recall in order to know, are they a fight worth having, or are they just someone we need to like actually make friends with again, kind of thing.
Yeah, and outside of those, I don't know, like those little kind of irks, like the bugs and glitches, you can kind of live with because they can get over that. And then the story, the random names, that's the only real kind of bad parts. There's another kind of things, like the game being like 150 gig. I understand because there's a lot of like beautiful. The game is as big because it's beautiful. And it's beautiful because it's big. So it's one of those catch-22s. You can't have a small game, but you can get over something like that. But 150 gig, we gotta start. I don't know what's going on here, but we gotta start getting them down.
It is a big boy, but I would say like definitely it's
worth it for the best game probably ever made.
I would say it's worth it. Like definitely when we finish off the third arc, it will probably get removed from my computer to free up space for other things. But I would say like for me the positive is the story, like development in it, but the feedback for me is the story element gets a little fuzzy, because definitely when you end up, I think that mid-second arc, some things were being said and I'm just sitting there going like, I actually have no idea who any of you people are or what the purpose, but they're big characters for the third arc, and I'm sitting there going like, this has not been mentioned before. Where are you? Where did you come from? And maybe it did get mentioned. I can't remember.
That's exactly it. So in the second arc, they're trying to set up for the finale in the third arc, but they're referencing these nonsense names that you can't remember because they're not visually or like audio.
Or maybe we didn't come across those like story like prompt for 2 of those characters. At least like Shadowheart was the third character that like her story brought us to that like arc point. But those other 2 characters that pop up there, we never got any voice clips that talked about them, and if they did, went straight over my head as to what they were referencing,
which is a shame because the game is so good and the stories are really, it's just, there's a cutscene for everything, and that helps it feel more immersive. But when the characters are made up jargon names that you can't differentiate between one guy and the other, even if they're in the same cutscene.
After 80 hours, like you're not gonna remember like every detail. Like we're not playing this back to back. We're playing this like once a week.
That's what disappoints me about it. Like I can't tell you who the main big bad's name compared to some guy in the Gith or the king of the Gith.
They're all the same, like to me.
That's the same.
I will say I do know what they look like, but I can't remember what their names are.
I can tell you what they look like.
Remember the purpose of them because they just got introduced. I think that's like, I think like that's the one thing. It's beautifully big, but it's also to its slight detriment too big. So I was like, oh, okay, who are you again?
You think the game is too long? Is that what you mean?
No, I think like there's so much detail that sometimes it's too hard to remember all the detail.
If they released a DLC next year, which they said they're not.
I
There's
hope.
no DLC
To be
for the
honest, I
game.
hope not.
That's interesting, because if they release DLC for it, I probably wouldn't buy it.
No,
Wouldn't
it's too big.
buy it.
It's too big as it is, and that's where like it's beautiful of a story arc, but it's also just that little bit too big of a story arc.
I think like the package is perfect the way it is, to be honest. It's just as in the package, as in how it's presented, and like the size of it, not the names of the people, which we've been over for the last 10 minutes.
I was gonna say we were only gonna give this like 5 minutes, and I'm pretty sure that's more than 5 minutes.
I mean, Baldur's Gate is worth it.
It's a lot of hours.
They are updating it next year to bring in new sub races or subclasses, sorry. I mean. And that's interesting because I mean, I'd play the game again.
But that's the thing. We'd play the game again, but I think I'd only play it as a speed run. So I'd use the new classes as an explorative to learn it soon, but I'd speed run it.
Yeah.
I think I'd speed run it. I wouldn't do as like this. The first run through this is where I'm loot gobbling my heart out. I'm finding all the like nooks and crannies, looking for everything I can do. But if they bring out new classes and I was tempted to do it, I'd definitely do it as a speed run to try and see how quick I can go through with the new classes.
Yeah. I mean, I started it again with Adam last week, and I did really enjoy it. But I'm not really into DLC anyway, because I feel like it kind of dilutes most games. It doesn't really add much. Like anything interesting. Anything interesting. It adds more content, but not really meaningful most of the time. So that's why it would have to be something meaningful. They said that they're never going to add DLC to it anyway, which is fine. It's
too big to also bring in a DLC.
But what if they brought it in DLC, which brought you to like, it's like 30 hours, and it brought you to like a new island with its own story, its own characters and stuff. But you could bring in your own character and like your own thing, and it had some recurring. You could bring Karlach, Lae'zel, like that's interesting. It depends on the premise of it, but yeah, I don't know. It's crazy because this is like probably the best game ever made.
Absolutely love this game.
I'm not clamoring for more because I feel like it's almost like the perfect package outside of the silly names. But it's like a ministry of silly names.
But like, I think that's the thing is, I think it's perfectly fine as it is. I don't see the need or the want for a DLC. I don't really mind like some upgrades of new like little things or anything, but like a new location as part of the story to me doesn't make sense, because frankly, once we get to the end of this third arc, that's it. That's the game done.
Yeah.
Like, I'd go back and have a mess with someone who for the first time was playing it. I'd play it through with them, and I'd play a different type of character, and I'd have like good crack on it. But I'm not going back for myself to play it again. I'm going back to play it with someone else who's playing it for the first time. And I'm like, how do you want a character to play this? Let's go. Woo.
I would be like that, and that's how I started with Adam last time, because I've seen it. I know what the story is. Although I don't like remember certain character arcs. In fairness, though, the second playthrough is helping me remember for where we are right at the end
so you
of
remember
Baldur's
all those
Gate.
ridiculous names?
No, I don't.
Not yet, anyway.
But it's helping.
Yeah. But I think, regardless, though, for me, I'd highly recommend this game for anyone. Regardless of any opinions I have, I would still recommend this game.
This is a must-buy. This was phenomenal. Like, it's a must-buy for any fan of video games, for tabletop games, for role-playing games. It's one of the best games. It's probably the best game ever made. Class. Absolutely brilliant. The only people who wouldn't be into it are people who don't like maybe turn-based combat or games that are too long. But if you are an avid, like a enthusiast video game hobbyist, you
gotta play this game at least.
You have to. This is one of those games where you have to play at least once in your life. Phenomenal game.
Yeah.
Just hands down, incredible.
Oh, are they your final words?
Final words. I've written a summary in the blog. It's okay, the definitive video game experience and the closest we've ever come to replicating tabletop role-playing games as a video game. Absolutely exceptional. Thank you to everybody involved in making this game a sheer triumph of art and technology. Mwah.
Deserve the
Chef's
awards
kiss.
that I got. Which, that's obviously our bonus game. We now get to bring us into our Future Frothers.
This is actually one of my favorite segments. There's so many games coming out next year that to choose one, there's so many games that are currently in early access that I'm looking at that really want for next year. It's just exciting. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just great.
It is, though. I think that's the thing. Like, there's always going to be so many games, and like we are in a very peak, like, constant era, and it's not just like big names. It's the indies are really coming into play. But there's so many different ones, and like I love when they do the game shows and they show us what's upcoming. For me personally, I forget what it was like. Future Frothers, I do forget them because like they're in the distance, they're not released yet, they're somewhere on a wish list. So that's why I love doing this, definitely, because last year's Future Frother, I had Coral Island down, a cozy game. I did not get to play it yet because I was hoping it would come out on Switch, but with the Steam sale, I've decided I'm just going to go ahead and buy it on my computer, because based off of other cozy games I've played, it's definitely a cozy value game that I think actually suits the PC more, just because of the art style, the mechanics. They've had a DLC come out that puts you like in underwater mechanics like a mermaid, so I'm going to go ahead and play that this year, and actually buy it as my Christmas game, so that way I can play it. And also I have loads of like games in there which will be on my top 3 for next year. It'll probably be in there depending on what I game. But I have picked a different Future Frother, which has not come out yet, which it will be a Switch game for me without a doubt, and it's only coming out on Steam first in 2025, and of course it's a Cozy Valley game. It has to be. It is Wish Upon a Llama. This was announced at the Wholesome Direct Christmas, like winter update and everything. This Cozy Valley game focuses more on the ranching end of things. So you're focusing on how to raise the animals, breeding the animals, feeding the animals, like creating like out into the wild these animals. Like, it is still gives you your classics of like, you know, interactions with the romancing, the finding a marriage partner within town, doing the gardening and everything. It's a pixelated game, and it's beautiful artwork. It's a real pastel style of like element, but one of my favorite things outside of the gardening in Stardew Valley is the animals in Stardew Valley. I love them so much, having the chickens, the rabbits, the like ducks, the horses, the cows, the sheep. I love them so much in Stardew Valley. I think their mechanics are always so interesting, and that's why like as soon as I seen this into Wholesome Direct, I was like, I'm done. This is my frother. I cannot wait. It's down for 2025. I genuinely think I would wait. I would just get this on Steam when it comes out, but as soon as it comes out on Switch, I will buy it again, because it's just one of those games I think I will keep it into like my rotation of things, because it's just so wholesome. Yeah. It's so wholesome.
Yeah, it looks great. It looks like, and it's funny, I see a capybara on the
It was a year
trailer.
of capybaras.
It was, and I feel like I have like a funny, it's like a bingo kind of drinking game. It's like for every capybara you see in a cozy game, take a shot.
2023 was the year of the frog games. I don't know why, but in 2023, every fifth game released in the wholesome like category was something to do with frogs. And I don't know what it was. I was like, why is everyone obsessed with frogs? I get it, some of them are super cute, but also, what's with the frogs? This year, in 2024, I will say there were a lot of capybaras popping up in like artwork. I've seen them like in the Vampire Survivor style games. There's a capybara version of that. In this game, there are capybaras. In Fae Farms, there's capybaras. In Luma Island that released, I'm pretty sure there's a capybara in it. Like, it literally was like a bingo card of what animal is going to be this year's feature. I would definitely say it was capybaras. That's why it's so funny that you see it in here. But there are like different things like unicorns and horses and all those sort of other like characters in it. So
yeah, it feels like it was capybara was like the breakout sort of animal for this year, and I wonder what next year's animal they'll latch onto. But yeah, that it looks like a typical cozy game that you'd enjoy.
Yeah, it's a typical Cozy Valley. The focus is on the ranching side of things, which I'm excited for because I don't really feel like I have a Cozy Valley game that is ranch specific. Obviously, I have like Sim Ranch Life or something like that, and I have Sims like Cottage Core, and now there's also a horse version of it. So like expansion. So like I have versions of some sort of animal raising game, but as a Cozy Valley specific, finally I have a ranch style game, and that's why it's going to be in there. So it's 2025. No specifics at the moment further than that, but it is my Future Frother, and I think my Future Frother will always be changing, mostly because the ultimate Lord and Almighty, one day I will get this, is Haunted Chocolatier, but that's my Haunted Chocolatier is your Silk Song. Who knows when it's going to release? It's just in the winds. It's there as a name. It'll happen when it happens.
I'm convinced now that Silk Song actually doesn't exist. The studio flooded and they lost all the copies of Silk Song, and it's gone, flown away down the river.
Down the wind. But that's like, that would be your Future Frother, but it's not, because it's just in the wind and it'll happen when it happens, like my Haunted Chocolatier. But you do have a Future Frother that is coming out. I
do. So Future Frother last year was in fact a Helldivers too. And that game was bloody great. It's like the main multiplayer game we're playing all year. Just a few missteps. Well, with every good step, like they would have a misstep, as we just said. But that's not to detract how fun it is to play. But next year there's a load of games, and honestly, I could have put any number of these games. There's Slay the Spire 2, Hades 2. See, these games are in early access and have already launched, so we're kind of just waiting. And actually, I only realized that this game isn't launching next year. It's coming into early access. But look, regardless of it, I'm still really excited about it. There's Witchfire. Yeah. There's Quasimorph. Shout out to Quasimorph. Yeah, really looking forward to a few of those games. Silk Song doesn't exist. Even Rotwood. Like there's a load of games coming out, but this game in particular I'm really excited for, and it is Menace. So Menace plays kind of like a XCOM. It's like that kind of turn-based tactics, military sort of same, but it kind of has this it sounds interesting in a way that we don't really know that much about it, but you have to take on different challenges and different maps and tasks and stuff like that. I suppose the usual XCOM spiel, but we haven't seen XCOM. I don't know when XCOM 2 came out, probably 2014, 15, 16. Yeah. But either way, Menace I'm really interested in because it's from the same developer as Battle Brothers, and Battle Brothers was crazy difficult. Yeah. Now I've recently read that this isn't going to be as hard or as unaccessible as Battle Brothers.
They always say that.
But they do say that. But I am interested in this because I don't know. What I've read on the Steam description and some of the Discord explanation and announcement kind of posts kind of makes it seem like it's more of a squad-based shooter, turn-based, and you have to you go on a run. I think it's more like roguelite, where you kind of like you have to find armor and different kind of, you can upgrade your units and get different like call-ins, like air support and all this, and you have to find weapons, and you can choose like different loadouts, and you can bring like robots, and you can salvage like weapons and like vehicles from the maps, and like you have like interpersonal relationships with like factions in different planets, and you fly from different planets to help like different kind of different factions. Yep.
Looks very interesting. I'm just like based off like seeing, because I haven't seen this, like, so I didn't even know until like now what your Future Frother was. It's very interesting because it first comes to mind Helldivers 1
Actually,
kind of
yeah.
style.
Yeah.
But it's like Helldivers 1 met Undaunted, the board game.
Oh, yeah.
Just like looking at how like some people like go in and it looks like you have to try and get around, destroy certain bases, flanking, that sort of movement style. It just made me think of, oh, this is like Undaunted.
Yeah.
For some reason, it made me think of that.
Well, the game was supposed to release at the end of this year, so it's supposed to already be out. One of the interesting things was the announcement trailer kind of showed off sort of monsters. So there's monsters in the game as well, and I think that might be the menace. But I thought it was just going to be like a military shooter, but the fact that there's sort of like a monster sort of zombie sort of element to it as well, and I kind of like that it's like a run-based kind of roguelite structure, as well as being kind of like squad-based tactics, and you have to scrounge and scavenge for weapons, and it's like last-ditch attempts to like overwhelm, or you are being overwhelmed most of the time, they said in a blog post, so it'll be like very difficult, and I imagine it will be difficult like Battle Brothers.
Yeah, it looks really interesting though.
Yeah, it looks really cool, and even the monsters you see in the trailer there are kind of like weird tech, sort of like zombie, like bio sort of monsters. Yeah, mixed with like tech. It does look cool, and I like the kind of I don't know how you say, like the turn-based sort of mechanics to it, and it's real like militaristic. I'll be interested to see what the outside of that is. What is the hub world? How do you get missions? How do you get rewarded? Things like that. But from what I've seen, and the fact that it's from Battle Brothers as well, Ironhide Studios, I think it is. But it's being published by Hooded Horse, who have had a crazy year publishing strategy games. They're behind like the biggest strategy games you've probably seen all year. Overhype. Sorry, not Ironhide. Thinking of a different studio. Overhype, and yeah, published by Hooded Horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't wait for this game.
It looks really good. I'll be excited to see like if you end up getting it by end of 2025 in the end.
To tell you the truth, probably not, because the game's coming into early access, and I have a thing against buying early access games.
That's fair. I think we've only ever done one early access game, and that was Core Keeper.
True, actually. Now, in fairness, when we got Core Keeper, it was very, very, very close to the launch release. Yeah, general release. So
we still put a lot of hours in there before they actually released it.
Actually, we probably have more hours in the early access version than we do in the release version, I would say. But at the same time, like, early access is not the complete package for me, and I don't want to get involved in a game that's not a complete package, because the time to get reinvested in a game and be re-excited about mechanics that you've already seen and already have played with, even if they weren't fully built, it takes the sting off the excitement.
Yeah, I get that. No, I do get that, because that's like even why like Hades 2 is still just as a future for you. It's not a game, because it's still like early access.
That's my favorite game of all time, and I'm refused to touch it until it's like the final complete package. I'd rather pay double from what it's worth now for the full release, just because I know that game's going to be crazy, and I'm not going to play some half-hearted, half-finished game where they haven't even got the story finished. Like, I want, or any of the content, the gods. I want the full package.
I feel like it's like a new way of getting beta testers is by doing early access.
Well, it is actually.
It is.
No, you're dead right. That's exactly what it is.
That's the thing. Like, they're getting all that free like content back.
You're paying to help them develop the game, which is fine, because if you want to be involved, you can pay your way in, and you will have a say in how to better the game, and then ultimately you can have the game that you've helped shaped and that fans of the genre or that game really want. But for me, like, I don't have a fervent love for any one studio or any one game that I want to pay in to kind of like blunt the edge of that sort of like that initial excitement and attraction to a game, when you know the honeymoon period in the game, you first get it and it's so much fun and it's so new and you're still exploring it and you're finding out the upgrades and you're finding out how the game plays and you're trying to like digest how to play the game the best way, and that is gone when you first play early access games, because you're playing a half-hearted way, so it blunts the rest of the game. It's not as sharp because you already know what to expect at the full release.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't want to touch
I think
early
the
access.
only benefit of an early access game is if you're getting it at a cheaper price and just leave it, don't play it.
Well, that's actually how I got Songs of Conquest. I was following Songs of Conquest for like the last 2 years, and it was just releasing. It was a month out, and I bought it. I got it for £7. I think it's like 33 or 34 euro. Yeah, they had a steep sale when early access, and with only a month to go.
Yeah.
And I got it for £7 on GOG.
See, I think that's where the early accesses come in handy. It's like getting a board game off of Kickstarter rather than in a shop. You're getting the special edition things rather than the actual stop.
That's true. But for me, I think not early access, but early adopters in anything, in tech, in video games, they always get the blunt edge of things. They always get the short end of the stick.
Whereas we always say wait like 6 months after release to play, because all the updates would have come in, and I think the greatest example of that will always be Cyberpunk, of how that game launched and how that many updates that went through. But
True.
It does take, I think, 6 months for a game to truly settle into its bones, to make sure everything's out and everyone's gotten to points and new people can come in for it. So yeah.
And like bugs can be ironed out. They can start getting an idea on what kind of content people want, what people are bouncing off, what they like or don't like, and they can help smooth those things. That's why a year after, it's already been tested by the general public, and it's already been it'll already be on sale by so much more.
So it's kind of a watch the space in 2026, maybe more so.
Pretty much. So I probably won't be buying Menace, but it is one of the most exciting games that's not like a mainstream game that's coming out next year. Slay the Spire, Hades 2. Another game that I would recommend is, if it was on a Future Frother, is probably Witchfire.
Yeah.
That probably will be releasing into full release next year. I've been following that for the last couple of years. It looks amazing as well. It's kind of like a extraction shooter, single player, like first person shooter. It's very interesting looking, but that'll probably release.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see. Like, this is why, like, I made sure to check what my Future Frother was after. Like, where actually did I go with this? And why didn't I go with it? But I think the only thing that will put me off on my Future Frother is if I really do end up deciding waiting till it comes to Switch. But as I said with Coral Island for 2023 Future Frother, I ended up waiting because I was like, oh, I think like it'll be a better Switch game. But I've also changed that opinion now of like what I think is better as a Switch game, like a console game versus a PC game. So that's why I'm going to buy Coral Island.
Absolutely.
Versus I think I might just bite the bullet because for my Future Frother and just get it on Steam when it comes out, because I think like it takes 6 months to a year. But in fairness, Coral Island is still not on Switch as far as I know. I checked it before, like at the start of this month when I was double checking things, but I don't think it's come out on Switch yet. So that's like a year that I could have been playing this game and I haven't. So now I'm like, okay, well, it's on the sale. I'll just get it on the sale now and just play it.
You know what?
It has expansions.
You'd be better off getting a Steam Deck, actually.
Honestly, yeah. I'll just borrow yours.
Yeah. I think they're on the Christmas sale right now.
Yeah. The thing is, though, with the Steam Deck is not everything Steam Deck supported yet. Why you could probably get away with playing it, but unless it's marked as Steam Deck supported, it does take away on that, like, enjoyability of the game if it's not supported.
Yeah, I understand that.
So...
Well, it's funny, we could talk about Future Frothers until the cows come home, but before we finish, there's one more game that we will be playing next year that could have made it onto this, but I have already prepared the footage and knew I was going to put Menace in.
Before the release, yeah.
Well, Split Fiction.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all I had to say.
This is a Future Frother for ourselves because we played as our couple Future Frother. It will be. We already designed this whole thing, so we couldn't put it in after that was announced and everything. It was just gonna, like, we already had it planned. But it is definitely one that I can't wait for. It's from the makers of It Takes Two. We loved that game, and I cannot wait for Split Fiction.
Yeah, I'll be excited for Split Fiction. Obviously, Haze Light with It Takes Two and the follow-on to that game. But it'll definitely be on our Best Bits stream compilation next year. There'll be so much messing.
It's released in March, right before our birthday, so it's our birthday game for us.
How perfect is that?
And I'm so excited because it is, instead of being from It Takes Two, for anyone who hasn't seen what Split Fiction is about, it is two female novelists are going in to try and get their novels published, and they're using this new tech in order to try and make stories come alive, and they end up in the same universe, but they're actually crossing between one novel, which is a fantasy kind of D&D style medieval fantasy story, and the other novel they get pulled into like as a different chapter, which is a futuristic cyberpunk style of novel. So you're going through their novels, bouncing between the two as like different chapters unfold to try and get out of their novels. So I cannot wait. Some of the gameplay that we've already seen are really, I think, shows the difference from It Take Two, that it's not the same, just going to be the same game, same mechanics. There are a lot of new mechanics in this, so I can't wait to see how they like develop it out.
Well, for me, It Takes Two like revolutionized the couch co-op split screen adventure game. It's just everything. Every new scene was a new sort of scenario or puzzle to solve, or a new mechanic.
New mechanic is the best way to describe it.
It was just a blockbuster, like action-packed, so much fun. And I know that because Hazelight are behind it, and your man Joseph Fares, he's hilarious anyway.
Right.
So
we still talk about It Takes Two. I still cry about that elephant. Whoever has played it, they know what I mean. I still cry over that. But it was just such an ingenious style, and I think that really started us in our couch co-ops, finding games that we can play together rather than just sitting next to each other and watching the other person play a game, because that's how we first started playing games, was you watching me playing Uncharted 4 in your house, and then anytime combat came up I just handed it over. And that's how we started our like dual playing.
Yeah, that's
Pass
true.
the controller.
Yeah, that is a good point. It all started with Uncharted 4.
Yeah, and now look at us now, talking about
Split
games.
Fiction.
Woo!
Brilliant.
I think that summarizes in all of our games, all of our Future Frothers.
Yeah, I think so. And with that, we had an action-packed 24 with loads and loads of games released. We had some great party games. We had some great co-op games, great stream games. The best of the year stream is up right now. There's 3 videos.
Best bits.
Yeah, the best bits. So part 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, they're up now. So if you want to see those, they're here on the YouTube as well. But it was a great 2024, and I don't have anything to cheers you.
We just have our little glasses.
I still have a little bit. You don't have any.
I don't have any. Don't look at it. It's fine. But cheers to us for our next year.
Cheers to 25.
We're just gonna have a good day.
You can't drink anything.
I'm just drinking as well. I drank my drink versus he not.